Hello, this is Dillon Paiva, your Club 420 class Executive Director. I am here with Mitch Brindley, the President of the ICSA, and Dana Rolander, who is a representative of Midwest College Consulting. They are here with us today to talk about college and college sailing. First up, we're going to have Mitch is going to talk with us about the new Intercollegiate Sailing Association recruiting rules that are going to kick into effect in July. And then after that, Dana is going to talk with us about the best way to kind of revamp your college resume in light of global pandemic and things you can do to fill in your resume gaps. So we're excited to have both of you here with us. Thank you all for coming. Mitch, can you give us a brief intro?
Sure. Well, first, just on behalf of College Sailing, Intercollegiate Sailing Association, I'm happy to be here. I'm the president of College Sailing. And over the years, certainly over the last 10 to 15 years, college sailing's growth has been a competitive growth. And there's been certainly greater pressure as teams become more competitive, spending more money on the sport, supporting with greater resources. There certainly became a greater emphasis on recruiting. Back when I started coaching in the late 1900s, recruiting was relatively simple and easy. And if you had a varsity team, you had advantage, just because in some ways you had advantage. You didn't have to do much. People, if they wanted a structured program, they just showed up. As there became more and more varsity teams, there was a lot more emphasis on recruitment and more sophisticated recruitment. And we had no recruiting rules. For years, we've had zero recruiting rules. Anyone could do anything you wanted to do to entice a high school student to come to your campus. And
give scholarships.
Except for give scholarships, exactly. College sailing still has a rule that prohibits financial aid based on sailing ability. And so you can still achieve academic scholarships and other merit-based scholarships. But in the last several years, there became a greater desire to establish some recruiting rules that were more closely aligned with the NCAA rules that were designed to protect the student athlete or prospective student athlete. And so we had hired a consultant, College Sailing did, and one of the recommendations that came from that was establishing some of these rules. Just that they found that there was evidence that there was a desire to establish some rules, and so this is kind of our first stab at some rules. They're basically, they're relatively simple, relatively broad-based, apply across the board to varsity and club programs, et cetera. And we hope that they'll be fairly easy to apply, but they do impact the high school sailor. And so that's what the intention is just to protect the high school sailor and hopefully make it fair for everybody. We realize that there's some sailors that have unique access to coaches maybe during their summer program, and there's some coaches that might have unique access to sailors. And so this is an opportunity to kind of keep it fair for everybody as much as possible. It limits some of the actions that a coach can take, and also what a prospect can do when they're on campus looking at a school. So.
Excellent. Before we hop into the recruiting rules, Dana, can you give us a little bit of intro for you as well?
Sure, yeah. So my company is Midwest College Consulting. I have a little offshoot of that is College Sailing Associates. I am a college advisor, an independent college counselor, and work with students and families across the country on their college search and application process. I end up working with a lot of sailors because I have 3 boys who were all competitive sailors. One of them sailed in college, and just have met a lot of people in the sailing community through that. So it's kind of a merged of my 2 interests. So yeah.
Excellent. All right, well, let's hop right into it. I'm going to go to our next slide here, and this is going to be our first set of the new ICSA recruiting rules.
So what this is doing is describing what the what the limitations are, and let me see if I just minimize this. So off-campus recruiting contacts shall not be made with an individual or his or her family members before July 1 prior to his or her junior year. Recruiting is discussion with a prospective student athlete by an athletic staff member or other representative of the institution's athletic interests regarding the attendance at the institution with the specific intent to compete for that institution. So that's describing, essentially is defining what recruitment is, as well as what the limitations are. So before July 1 of high school sailor's junior year, you should not have contact with a college coach or another member of the athletic staff or representative of athletic interests. And when representative of athletic interests is a really broad kind of catch-all term that is describing someone that may be a donor or alumni to the program or something like that, that is specifically trying to recruit someone into to an institution so they can be a member of that athletic team.
A term that other sports players or enthusiasts might be familiar with is a booster. Booster would be a person with who has athletic interests.
That's exactly right. And all these rules are really a simplified version of the NCAA Division I and Division III rule book, bylaws. And so that's where we didn't make all this stuff up. We're trying to fit into the box that all the rest of college sports are in. And so we found that that's a good way for us to try to go. Obviously, in the world of sailing is relatively small. We go to a regatta, and we may, summer regatta could be an open event, like a J70 event, whatever. You might have unavoidable incidental contact, and that's expected, and that's defined as contact that is not prearranged, is not made for the purpose of recruitment of the prospective student athlete, involves only normal civility. So you're like, just greetings and so forth, but you're not suddenly talking to them about, hey, why don't you come to my school and be a sailor for me? So so that's that's kind of where it goes. So, a staff member or representative of the institution may provide general information about the institution or team, as long as it's not specifically tailored to the prospective student athlete or his or her family. So.
Good. All right, we're going to move on to the next part of this.
So here, a staff member or other representative may provide this essentially telling you what the staff member can do or coach can do, may provide the prospective student athlete with materials that are widely available to the student body, or general correspondence, which is limited to a single sheet of paper. And again, these are rules right out of the NCAA rule book. General correspondence can include a fact sheet about the institution's team, questionnaires, business cards, but it can't be, you can't have like a mock-up, Sailing World cover or something that had your, the C420, class champion on it, and you couldn't mock something up and send it to them specifically for them or anything like that.
Or could you have a a picture of a penny with the prospective student athlete's name already stenciled onto it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Um, Recruiting contact at events. This is really one thing that's really kind of important, I think. Recruiting contact at events that a prospective student athlete is competing in may only occur after competition has concluded for the day and a prospective student athlete is released by his or her coach or advisor. So, and it may change the way some things have been done in the past, but we've kind of feel in most sports, and Zay feels that it's not fair to a high school athlete who's in the middle of a competition to have a coach who they may really want to talk to come up to in the middle of their game. I mean, imagine being a soccer player and you're sitting on the sidelines waiting to go in, or a basketball player, and a coach comes up and starts to try to talk to you in the middle of a game. I mean, that would be absurd, right? But in the past, it's essentially what college coaches have done. If they go to talk to a high school sailor, during a rotation between sets or something like that at a college, at a high school sailing event. So this rule will prevent that. And you can only talk to the coach. The coach can only talk to the prospective student athlete after they've been released for the day by their coach or advisor. So.
And Mitch, when the coach is talking to the prospective student athlete, is that, are you talking about after July 1 of their junior year, or that's the restriction before then? They can talk to them, but. So
they can talk to, a coach can talk to a student athlete or prospective student athlete after July 1 of their junior year. But prior to that, there should not be contact other than incidental contact. It should not be contact that's of a recruiting nature. Obviously, some coaches are working at summer programs, and they may be in a situation where they are working with an athlete, but they cannot
engage in recruiting conversations.
They cannot be having a recruiting conversation at that time.
Yeah,
I think that talk to me when talk to me after July 1. Then we can have that conversation, that type of thing.
Yeah, Mitch, you'd mentioned earlier that these were a kind of simplified version of the NCAA recruiting rules, and I think part of that is to allow for that exact scenario that you were talking about, where coaches may be having a summer job somewhere and having regular contact with opti sailors or younger double-handed sailors or laser sailors, and there's going to be incidental contact, and these rules aren't trying to prevent that. They're just trying to provide structure, and more importantly, these rules exist to protect the student athlete.
Right. We're trying to put boundaries up, safe, healthy boundaries for everybody. Likewise, a coach, has got a job to do. Coaching, it may be coaching, youth sailors at an event. That's what their focus should be, not recruiting those athletes at that time. And so, and likewise, the athletes that are competing, they should be focused on learning and the event that they're participating in, not being recruited by a coach. So,
yeah, and I think that these two rules are ones that are definitely going to have on this screen are definitely going to have an impact on our current youth sailors. Because one thing that often gets talked about is teams handing out Burgee stickers to anybody that's interested or wants one. That's something that would not be allowed under this new rule.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger things is, it's essentially you can give them anything that admissions office gives away.
Yeah.
So if the admissions office is giving away stickers with the school logo on it, or t-shirts, whatever, it has to be something that they are giving away.
Yeah.
It can't be something that you've made that you're giving away. The big thing, we've seen schools giving away pennies, and that they can't do, obviously. You can't give away, it has to be readily available to all the other general population that might be interested in that university or college. So So generally, though, those are generally printed materials and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Pens, or sometimes they have
yeah,
like
yeah. So,
all right, we're going to move on to the next set of rules.
So this is talking about when someone can come for a visit, and an institution may not host a PSA for a visit before July 1 of his or her junior year. A hosting is defined as the travel of the prospective student athlete to the institution with the purpose of meeting with, learning more about the team. A visit may last no longer than 48 hours. So, generally, we're again defining the visit. In the rest of NCAA, there's official and unofficial visits. We haven't gone to that definition. We're just talking about if you're coming onto campus, we're not preventing you from taking your own trip to look at a school anytime you want. It's just once you have, you want to meet with the coach, have a meeting with the coach, and you're trying to schedule a meeting with the coach to learn more about the team, or watch a practice, you have to do that after July 1 of your junior year. So your freshman or sophomore year, if you want to go take go on campus visits, you certainly can do that, but you can't set up a meeting to meet with the coach at that time. You could take a general campus tour, all that kind of stuff to maybe narrow your field, but you might go by and look at the facilities, but you wouldn't be able to schedule a visit with the coach, because that'd be considered a contact prior to July 1 of your junior year.
That would not be incidental contact.
That would not be incidental, because it's a prearranged face-to-face encounter, right? So during the visit, the prospective student athlete may attend workouts and practice. However, they're not permitted to participate in either workout or practice in any way. And we feel this is pretty important. And I know, and this was probably when we were formulating this policy, there were some coaches that really like to have their prospects sail and practice, because it gave the prospects a really good idea of where they would stand on the team, or where they would, how good that team is, or something like that. But we felt that for the most part, that would be a definite no-no in the NCAA, because it's considered a tryout, and you can't have a tryout unless you've done a physical and everything else. The person's eligible to compete and everything else. We felt that the safer mode here is you can go and watch a practice, ride in the coach boat. You can sit through the chalk talks, debriefs, all that. And you can go to the workouts and watch the workouts. But you're not going to be able to do the workouts with their strength coach or with their coach. You're not going to be able to get in a sailboat for practice or anything like that. And that's really to protect the prospective student athlete. One, it's a liability issue. If someone's injured, imagine you get hit in the head. Any number of injuries that could happen, that do happen. If they're there just to visit, it's hard to have they been approved to participate? Has there been a waiver signed and all that kind of stuff? It's just a lot better if we limit that, prevent that kind of activity. But obviously, it's a great way to going to watch a practice. You'll get a good feel for how the coach may run their team, and how even the team work, how the team meshes together and things like that. However, you would not be able to get in a boat. And also, we felt there's a lot of pressure on. There could be a lot of pressure on a high school student to perform if they got out on the water in the middle of a college practice. So that's why that limitation's there.
All right, now to the teeth part of the rules, the consequences.
Right. So, you can't have. It's not effective to have rules without consequences. So, unfortunately, we have to have some consequences, and one of these is as such. it may result in the loss of eligibility for the student athlete for the, once you might not be eligible when you go to college if you did that, and loss of postseason opportunities for the institution. So that school might lose a berth or the opportunity to participate in a national championship.
Mitch, I know so these are just getting implemented. We obviously haven't had any cases that have come to be reviewed or any instances that have come up, but do you foresee these types of violations getting penalized onto the prospective student athlete or more towards the institution?
I think it would depend on the severity of the action. And that's all decisions of eligibility are handled by our eligibility committee. So it'd be investigated by our eligibility committee. And that's where it would be addressed. And so in terms of the student's eligibility. For the colleges, our procedure rules would allow for a penalty to be imposed direct by the ICSA president or board as needed. So it's hard to say because I suspect it's probably more of an institutional penalty than a individual penalty, but it's there for both, I think.
Yeah.
Just to give it a little bit more meat. Hopefully, I mean, gosh, I certainly would not want to see that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to imagine that there would be a serious breach of the rules for the student athlete to get penalized, and probably a much less severe breach of the rules for the institution to be penalized.
And, we've had situations in the past where we had a high school sailor hopped into a college regatta to fill in for something.
Really?
And it just was so complicated because it was what kind of rule violation was it? Yeah. And but because it just got very complicated because it was essentially did the individual use a season of eligibility? According to our rules, they did. The rules say as soon as you sail in one race, and one college sailing race, that's a year of eligibility. But then the school was penalized because they were an ineligible sailor. They hadn't been approved to represent that school. So
that's a strange one. I'd never heard that.
It was bizarre, and so
Interesting. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our recruiting rules. Mitch, do you have any final thoughts, or Dana, do you have any final questions?
No, I think you mentioned this, but what about how will it work with teams that don't have coaches or have part-time coaches?
Right. So that would still apply, and the rule will apply the same whether it's a club team or varsity team. And the challenge is at the club level, it may be their team commodore or something like that might be arranging some of the meetings. The same thing there, though, that team member that is in charge of recruitment will still need to know the rules, that they can't do any of these prohibited activities with a high school student prior to their July 1 of their junior year. And so, obviously we'll push these rules out. They're intended to be implemented as of July, and it's currently being, the rules are currently being revised, or not revised, but put in a format that will fit into our procedure rule book appropriately, or procedure rules appropriately. And they will be communicated as those come into play. That's gonna be a little bit of process. The ICSA or the NCA rules, they have, the rule itself is usually very basic, and then there's a long list of exceptions that get complicated. And that's what makes the NCA rule book so big, is actually all the exceptions. We haven't got to that point to where, I'm sure there's stuff that we're overlooking, and we may have to clarify them in with exceptions or definitions in other ways. But right now, this is our starting point. And so we recognize that there may be some, I guess, a little bit of a hiccup along the way to make sure that these are actually doing what we want to do, which is create a fair playing field for everyone, and that that everyone has the same access to, and also that no one feels that they have an unfair advantage or disadvantage.
I think it's also worth pointing out that so these rules were voted on and passed this January, but it was not the complete set of what was proposed. So it was almost everything that was proposed, but there was a long debate about the wording for every single one of these rules amongst the college coaches, and when there were parts that there was not a consensus on, that those parts were eliminated from this set of rules to be reevaluated later.
Right.
So yes, to Mitch's point, I think that 5 years from now, this list of rules is going to look very different and probably a little bit longer because of exceptions that are going to come up.
Right. And I would say, just to clarify, these weren't developed just by the college coaches. These were passed by the board, the ICSA board of directors, which is not just college coaches. There are quite a few college coaches on, but also there's an undergraduate representative from every conference, and there are also some conference commissioners that are directly affiliated with club teams and so forth. So it's not just 30 college full-time college coaches implementing these. So
excellent. All right, well, thanks a lot, Mitch. Please stick around as we shift focus to kind of the college admissions process, and feel free to ask any questions you have. And Dana, I'm going to pass things over to you if you want to give us an intro, or we can hop right into it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think I'm just planning on talking about kind of the changes that have happened recently and how the pandemic has influenced the college search and application process, which is impacting students of all ages in high school, and just kind of how to work around those things, and just some suggestions about how to move forward now with your plans. So, yeah.
All right, here we go.
So one of the things that has impacted a lot of students, and maybe a lot of you, is that your college visits were canceled. So juniors and sophomores even sometimes will use college visits to start to identify the things that they like and dislike in colleges. And seniors, of course, are finalizing their lists, and having those spring and summer visits canceled can be a little bit tricky. So the good news is that colleges have stepped up and provided solutions through offering virtual tours and some other things for students to kind of evaluate fit, look at colleges, and find out more information. So that means that you need to be proactive about it, and go to the college websites, and on their admissions page under visits, in most cases now you'll find that they are offering virtual tours. And some of them offer information sessions as well, which are really great sessions to find out more about the college and also about the admission process at that college. So in addition to that, you can do virtual tours through some other resources on the web. And I have some links for you at the end of the presentation, but these Campus Real and UVisit and Campus Tours are 3 other organizations that offer virtual tours of campuses. Another thing that colleges are offering now that is really unusual and kind of a cool thing is Zoom or phone calls with admission representatives or students. So some colleges have these, actually have appointments you can book right on their website with your local admission representative or a student. So that's something to look for too. It's a great way to ask questions about the college, and also to sort of demonstrate your interest in the school while you're finding out more. If that isn't offered, you can search for your regional representative on the college website under admissions and email them to request a call or ask questions to them. If they're not published, and some schools don't publish them, then you can just reach out to the admissions office and do the same thing. And then there are all kinds of resources online, other websites and sources. Some of them you've probably used in the past: YouTube, Reddit, Niche is student reviews, College Navigator, and there are a variety of other places. Some of your high schools are on Naviance. That's a great way too. And social media. Social media is a great way to learn more about a college. Follow them on whatever your social media platforms are. The colleges are there. So those are nice ways to learn more about schools too. And then just interviewing people you know, friends who are a little bit older than you, who've attended some of the schools that you're interested in, relatives, parents, friends can all share valuable input from their perspective on the college. And then lastly, if you do know what you're planning on majoring in, it's great to reach out to a professor in your prospective major if you'd like to know more about how the major is structured at that school, a little bit more maybe about the advising process and that sort of thing. So you can definitely find faculty members on the college's websites.
You know, one thing that I know that I'm not the only person to have this thought, but we're kind of lucky that this happened in the information technology age, because there are so many different resources and ways to get information out there and stay connected. So you made a really good point that I liked, and I want to emphasize that the information is there, but students might have to do a little bit more work than they're used to find it. But the information is absolutely out there.
Yeah, and all of you should be experts at finding information online with your e-learning. So exactly. Yeah. So standardized tests, this is a big one. So we've been hearing, I get news every day from the colleges and from ACT and the College Board about changes in standardized tests. So some of you, those of you who are juniors and senior and rising seniors, probably had some of your tests or a test canceled. So the testing agencies have announced that they are offering additional testing to provide more opportunities for students to take tests. So the SAT is going to be offered monthly from late August through December, and then in spring, which is more applicable to juniors. Some high schools will be offering, so the ACT and the SAT offer in-school tests that many of you may have been planned to take, or if you were lucky, got to take in your high school. But you can definitely check with your guidance office to see if your high school is going to take advantage of those school day tests that are in September or October this year. And then ACT is offering multiple test dates in September and October to make up for some of the ones that were canceled. And then they also offer it in December and in the spring. So the biggest trend with testing is the test optional movement. So what's been happening is colleges have, daily, colleges are dropping the testing requirements for the class of 21, the class of 2021, the rising senior class, because their test dates were canceled. So some colleges are becoming test optional for this year only for the class of 2021. And some have moved to a test optional policy as a trial basis for the next 2 or 3 years or permanently.
So Dana, I have a question for you. There were some schools that were doing this pre-COVID as well, right? There was a small movement of schools that were going to test optional.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Dillon. So, and it is a movement that's happening across the board before COVID. That's absolutely true. So I think COVID really pushed it along. And I think we're going to see that in the future, many more colleges will be test optional. So it's really important to know the policies of the colleges and check back often because they change. I've heard from colleges that they're announcing these policies so quickly they haven't been able to change everywhere on their websites yet. So I use fairtest.org as my resource. It's a great resource. They keep a running tab of test optional colleges, and they also have a separate list of colleges that are test optional for next year only. So it's important to understand exactly what test optional means. So just because a college is test optional doesn't mean you universally should not send in your test results. So who should send scores? So if you, and also test optional is not the same as test blind. So there are a few colleges out there, not many, who actually don't look at test results at all. So that's different. So test optional is a student has the choice to send the scores or not. So if you have taken the test and your score is within the range of admitted students for that particular college, then by all means, and in particular this year, you should go ahead and send your scores. If you, let's say you took the test in December, you're a rising senior, you took it in December, let's say you got a 28 on the ACT, and the mid 50% range of scores for accepted students at the school you want to attend is, say, a 30 to 32, then I would say definitely prep and consider taking it again in the fall, because you're kind of right there. You might be able to get a higher score. So who benefits from not submitting scores? Because there are students that benefit from not submitting. And that would be if you have excellent grades, but your test scores are much lower relative to your grade. So if you have a strong curriculum, if you've gotten really solid grades across the board, but your test scores just really don't match up, you might very well be a good test optional candidate. In addition, if you're truly a terrible test taker, or your area where you live has been really impacted by the virus and you're not going to be able to take the tests, then you could consider applying only to test optional colleges. One thing to keep in mind, if you are not going to submit scores, is that colleges are going to be looking much more deeply at the other aspects of your applications.
Dan, I have another question for you. In your experience, for schools that are test optional,
Yes.
Is there any kind of discrimination against students who choose not to submit test scores? Is that
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think it's something that's really going to be changing over the next year.
Yeah, this test optional is interesting. We're test optional, have been test optional at ODU for a couple of years now, probably 4 years now.
Okay.
But it really, you still should submit the test scores unless you know you shouldn't, unless
Unless you're absolutely sure that it's a bad idea.
Yeah. It mattered, especially if you have good test grades, you're more likely to get academic aid, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think so what I'm hearing, well, first of all, there are statistics out there that show that for test optional colleges, students who submitted scores were admitted at a higher rate. So I think that does happen for a couple of different reasons. One, it's self-selecting. So the students with higher scores are going to tend to submit them over the students with lower scores. So, and then also I think colleges, and maybe this is something that you were just referring to, but colleges do, it's just an additional piece of quantitative evidence of achievement. So it gives colleges something very quantifiable to look at. So it's a different world now, and I think things definitely will be changing once more colleges get on the sort of the bandwagon of test optional and get more candidates who are test optional. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. But my recommendation to students is that if your scores are in the wheelhouse, then you absolutely should send. And if you don't, send scores, then definitely plan on putting together a really strong application, because they're going to be looking a lot more deeply at the other aspects of it. And then lastly, I think students will ask, should I prep for the tests? And I think in all cases, the answer to that is yes, even if you're a really strong test taker. And some students can just prep on their own, and do things online and get books and prep that way. And then other students do better if they have a class or a tutor or something like that. Applications. Okay, so this is mostly relevant to rising seniors, but for younger students, this is important for you too, because for juniors, this will happen next summer for you. So going back to the idea of doing what you can, focus on what you can control. So the Common Application is available now. So for all students that are on the Common Application, or for all colleges, all students can go out and create an account on the Common App now and enter quite a bit of information. And it's a pretty time-consuming process, so I do recommend students start working on this over the summer. So the Common Application has what they call account rollover, and that occurs on August 1, where the application rolls over to the new application season. But when that happens on August 1, anything a student enters under the main portion of the application, which is the Common App tab, is saved, and you'll just go back and answer a couple questions after August 1, and all your information will be retained. You just can't add colleges and fill out their little mini applications that go along with the Common App, their supplements. So you can't enter any college-specific information, but you can certainly work on the main portion of the application over the summer.
Gotcha.
And then essays. So I get a lot of questions about essays. Should I be writing about COVID? And understandably so, because for most of you, this is really kind of the biggest thing that has happened in your life. And that's true for many adults as well. So the Common App, in response to that, has added an additional optional essay to the application this year, and the word count is 250 words, and they're just basically saying that community disruptions such as COVID, this is the actual prompt, can have deep and long-lasting impacts. So if you need it, the space is yours to describe those impacts. So I think there are a lot of ways to respond. There are a lot of good reasons to use this essay, even if your family hasn't been horribly adversely affected by the pandemic. There's still may be good reasons for you to write this essay. So my recommendation, if you choose to write it, is kind of to break it down into 3 primary components. So the first would be, what effect did COVID have on you that led to meaningful changes? So what was the challenge that you faced as a result of the virus? And then how did these changes affect you? And most importantly, what actions did you take as a result of the changes to improve your situation or improve the situation of those around you? And it's really important that you make it personal. So even for students who who weren't impacted by the virus in terms of an illness of a family member or maybe a job loss or something like that, there are still other things that may have happened to you that would be worth sharing. So let's say your family has, you had 2 siblings at home e-learning and 2 parents who are trying to learn from home, and that was just a major strain on your Wi-Fi, and maybe you decided to take action and create some kind of system that your family would access the internet, each person at certain times, and everyone else would go on airplane mode or something to make sure that the person who needed to be on Zoom wasn't disrupted at that time. So something like that, to show that you were proactive and that you did something positive to help your situation, or maybe you helped people in your community or something like that.
Sounds good. I like that.
So that leads into the personal statement essay. So this is the 650-word essay that students write for the Common Application colleges. And this is really an opportunity to reflect on something significant about your personality, something that adds context to your application and allows the readers to get to know you more personally. And usually this is done through a story. So if you choose to write about the pandemic for this, it's really important, again, that you focus on the impact on you personally and how you grew as a result of your situation. So keep in mind a couple of things if you are contemplating writing about COVID for your personal statement. One, the Common App created this optional supplement in part as a response to colleges who thought that they were going to receive a high number of COVID essays. So, and also that colleges will be reading about significant hardships that students experienced during this time. So you kind of need to ask yourself, okay, is writing about COVID the best way to show colleges who you are? Is this one point in time what you want to share with them? Or do you want to share with them something that maybe is more central to who you are in your personal statement? So resume gaps. So this is something that really everyone has been impacted by now. Everyone really is in the same situation. So I like students to think about it a little bit differently. Everyone is sharing the same disappointment. All students are, that their activities were canceled, that their sporting events were canceled. But I think now is the time to show, to be proactive and show what you were able to do in light of this situation. So what you share with colleges and how you build your resume for younger students doesn't need to necessarily be the formal competition and organized events. So you can think outside the box here in deciding how to spend your time and what you're going to share with colleges. So from a sailing standpoint, you can set up a training schedule. If you're interested in engineering, say, maybe you can repurpose or re-engineer a boat for a part for a boat you sail, or solve a problem that occurs on that boat. Students have set up virtual sailing classes and incorporated virtual racing to keep the students engaged. There are ways you can help out in your community by helping repair boats at your community sailing center or something like that. And then plenty of other options for things to do outside of sailing or outside of sports that can help the community at large. So those are
I really like this list of kind of ideas and opportunities here. There's a lot of them that I think are very applicable to our membership in the 420 class and would be very, very helpful in things to creatively add to your resume. And again, I really like your point that this is something that everybody's going through right now. So everybody that's looking at colleges, sophomores, juniors, seniors, everyone's experiencing this the same way. So it's all about how you deal with the situation you're in and how to spin this in the best way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a final word, I think to seniors, make your senior year relevant. Some of your high schools went pass fail. Maybe you had a great upward trend in grades that kind of came to a halt because of the pass fail grades. But do well in your first semester. Take strong curriculum, and you may need those grades to share with colleges. Private colleges often ask for first semester grades, and if you end up getting deferred from a college, you'll need those grades as well. And the same sentiment for sophomores and juniors. Make your year count. Demonstrate your growth through your strong grades and through meaningful involvement, even if that means doing it in a socially distanced way.
All right. I don't think I have any questions. Mitch, is there anything that kind of popped into your head?
No, I thought it was great. A lot of really great content. A couple of things I was curious about is how relevant is a student's earlier years in terms, like the freshman and sophomore year, how relevant is that in the decision process that admission?
That's a great question. I think colleges like to see an upward trend. So for students who maybe have a blip on their transcript freshman or sophomore year, maybe didn't start out so well, but improved throughout the years, I think that's really, colleges really like to see that. So they like to see growth. And same thing with activities. It's great to be involved in something all 4 years of high school, but maybe you really found what you loved junior year and became really involved in it for junior and senior year. And that's definitely okay too.
And then the other question I had that comes up, I see a lot, is so many of the high school kids, there's a lot of pressure to do summer enrichment programs through their high school, and that might be go trips or of course none of that's happening this summer, but it seems like there's a lot of pressure on the kids to do that instead of their summer sailing, because they've got to their junior year they've got to go do all this other stuff, volunteer.
Are those like STEM? Are those like STEM related programs, Mitch?
Yes,
or is it more?
it's everything. It's paddling the Chesapeake Bay, whatever. A number of different stuff I hear where kids, they have to, miss a couple big regattas because they have to do this trip for their high school. It's usually their sophomore and junior year prior to their senior year. And so that's, the question is if everyone's doing that stuff, how do they stand out? Does it make a difference?
Yeah. Well, I think in particular, when you're talking about kids who are spending a significant amount of time sailing, sometimes students are afraid that, oh, this is really the only thing I have because it's so time consuming. But the reality is that having depth of involvement in your area of interest is really a positive thing. And I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think colleges really expect students to do these sort of what they refer to sometimes as pay to play, activities outside of school. So I think, it's good to have a little diversity. You maybe don't want everything on your resume to be about sailing, but you can certainly join a club at school. You can do some volunteer work. But yeah, I think that colleges really do like to see that students have an area of passion and that they dive deep into it.
That's actually encouraging and good to hear. I wasn't aware of that perspective. I was kind of along the same opinion as Mitch, that schools kind of frown upon a resume that is so specific towards sailing. But I like that point of view of the depth of your passion there. That's good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I don't think we have anything. Oh, here, your list of resources.
Yeah, so these are some links. Maybe we can find a way to be able to get these, get these out. But Fair Test, again, it's just fairtest.org is a great way to find out the policies of colleges. And these are just a few virtual tours that are available out there outside of the college websites. And then two of my favorite resources online, they have great blogs and provide great information. You can sign up for their mailing list, are they're actually test prep providers, but they have really good advice and information for free for students and families, Apple Ruth and Compass Prep.
Excellent. All right. Well, on behalf of the Club 420 class, I want to say a huge thank you to both Mitch Brindley with the ICSA and Dana Rolander with Midwest College Consulting. This is certainly a different college night than what our membership is used to, but I think the information here is incredibly valuable, and it's really going to help out our sailors. So again, thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.